Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. We have a very special episode of the podcast today. Actually, a live panel discussion that took place at Fest Tucson with Tucson-based critic and the festival director, actually, of Fest Tucson, Herb Stratford. Herb and I met years ago. I don't remember when. It was at the Critics' Choice Awards. I'm a member of the BFCA, which is the Broadcast Film Critics Association, and it's a group of several hundred film critics from all over the country. We just vote on, here are our favorite films of the year in various categories. And the award show takes place, actually, well, you know what? It's actually this Sunday, January 13th. Check your local listings, the Critics' Choice Awards. I will actually be at the award show with Herb and some fellow film critics. It's a lot of fun. It does, strangely enough, attracts major celebrities. Last year I was there. Nicole Kidman was there. Angelina Jolie. Wow, it was, I don't know, it's star-studded. It's a lot of fun. I'm actually sort of cowardly when it comes to meeting celebrities, as odd as that sounds. I'm not a big, my girlfriend is the complete opposite of me. She'll walk right up to a celebrity and ask to get a selfie. I'm just usually embarrassed and too shy. So, in fact, okay, all right. We went to this after party for the Golden Globes. I have no idea why I was invited. I was just invited. And Bill Murray was there tending bar. Odd, very strange. Just sort of standing behind the bar, but not talking to anyone in particular. And he did that thing, well, you know, we talked to the filmmaker who did that documentary about Bill Murray on a previous episode. All right, I know I'm rambling. Let's just get right to it. Herb Stratford and I had a great conversation, and I love, just as someone who is always been obsessed with ideas and conversation, I almost prefer to talk to people who disagree with my views. I feel there's an opportunity for me to learn something if I'm talking to someone who I don't see eye to eye with. Maybe a little understanding across the aisle. And so during this conversation, Herb and I talk about a number of things, and I always like when those ideas are challenged. It's just a more fun conversation. So a couple quick reminders. Follow Film Threat on everything, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We're Film Threat. Visit the Film Threat website on a daily basis. Sure, you know, we might have reviews of the big mainstream movies like Aquaman, which I happen to love in kind of a 1980s Flash Gordon sense. It's over-the-top superhero movie. I kind of liked Aquaman. You can read my Aquaman review, but you can also read reviews of movies you would never read about anywhere else. Films that are independently released, films that come out on VOD or in limited release, and also the big movies opening in theaters. Sure, we've got those too. And if you are a filmmaker and you'd like to have your movie reviewed on Film Threat, just go to filmthreat.com, scroll down to the bottom, there's a little button, submit, click on submit. Send us your movie. We will review it. Short films, documentaries, features. I love them all. Send them our way. And now, direct from Film Fest Tucson, conversation between myself and Herb Stratford.
Okay, everyone, welcome to day 3 of Film Fest Tucson. We're so thrilled that you're here with us today to be involved with this special kind of one-on-one conversation with a little bit of feedback from you guys. My name is Herb Stratford. I'm the director of Film Fest Tucson, and just a real quick shout out to Visit Tucson and Tucson Film Office and all of our great sponsors, and of course the Scottish Rite for being a wonderful host to have our screenings here. We're glad you came out on a rainy day to experience this experience that we're about to have together. Chris and I met. This is Chris Gore, everyone.
Hello, everyone.
Chris, thank you for having me. Chris and I met, I believe, when I was programming the Napa Valley Film Fest, and you came up. I think you were a juror or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so we met. That was probably 6-7 years ago. And we're also both members of the Broadcast Film Critics, so we run into each other every year. And I'd be like, I got to get you to Tucson, and finally it worked.
I'm first of all, perfect weather for a film festival, right? I mean, it hasn't rained in LA, and it feels like a year, but it's absolutely beautiful here. So thank you, Herb, for bringing me in. It really is an honor to be here.
Absolutely. No, we love having you here, and you're going to come back, that's for sure. So it's funny. Chris and I got on the phone, and of course, for those of you who don't know, Chris is the founder of Film Thread, and he's a legend. In my mind at least. I don't know. So you have such great experience and feedback and history and knowledge of film. So it's funny. We got on the phone and we were like, what should we do?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We were like, what should we talk about? Because it's just there's such a deep well there, and we came up with a loose framework of things, which you may have seen in your program, and I'm just going to read this out loud. Your indie film sucks. That's the first thing we're going to talk about. Movie critics are idiots, which kind of ties to the first one, I guess. And then how to direct a nude scene. Those are kind of our 3 talking points, and then we're going to work around those and through those, and then we're going to have some conversation with you guys as well. So let's start. Let's start with your indie film sucks. I mean, where do we go with that? Where do you want to start, Chris?
Well, I mean, I would just say something of, I have been, and heard you as well, a critic. Is one of the things that I do. I don't necessarily define myself by being a critic solely. I also have written books and made films. And
you were on TV for a while.
I did TV hosting for a spell. But I think that it's interesting to look at where film criticism has been, has evolved to now. And I wanted to briefly touch on that because is anyone here interested in, and I get this all the time, I want to write about movies for a living. I want to be a film critic. Anyone here? Okay.
Nice.
Let me smash your dreams right now. In this day and age where print is on the wane, although coming back in some ways, I don't know that I can solely recommend the living of a critic, right? And you and I have also worked in the film festival realm as well. But I will say, anyone who asks me that, what I'll do is there's 3 things I think you need to be an effective critic. And Herb, please feel free to add to this. But 1, you need passion. And there is no shortage of that. Whenever I see people writing about film on the internet, there is no shortage of passion. 2, you need writing skill. That is maybe more difficult to find these days. And then the 3rd is a knowledge of film history. So when I read someone's review and they said that, say, Avengers Infinity War is the best movie they've ever seen, I certainly did enjoy that film. I would say to that person, I think you need to see more movies. So, so a knowledge of film history, I think is important. What would you add to that, Herb?
I think I would add thick skin.
Right.
Because the thing is, everybody thinks they're a critic. So, a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, what's your favorite movie?" That's probably the stupidest question I ever get.
Right.
I don't mean that in a nasty way, but it's just like I don't have one. If pushed into a corner, I will say The Godfather. But what documentary? It's just such a wide thing. So it's kind of like people want to know what you think because you're a critic, but at the end of the day, they don't really care. They want to tell you what they think.
Right.
So I think you got to have a little bit of thick skin and a little just kind of like open mind to their ideas.
Well, clearly, I think thick skin it's interesting because when you look at the world of criticism, right? People who critique a thing. So when you look at, say, a Consumer Reports, or you read a review of a tech device like the new iPhone, or a car because you're looking at making a car purchase, no one gets upset because you don't like the Toyota RAV4 for 2019. They just think, well, it doesn't have these features and that's it. But when you critique a movie, people take it personally. So it's very interesting to see, and for me, I actually like to read more often than not people that I disagree with, because for me, it's an opportunity to learn something. So this person I vehemently disagree with constantly, it's an opportunity to open my eyes to something I might not have seen. So those are the type of critics that I like to follow, are the ones that will teach me something, and the ones I mostly disagree with. I grew up reading Pauline Kael and Siskel and Ebert, watching the Siskel and Ebert show. And so I've just always enjoyed Ebert's philosophy that talking about film is an opportunity, it's a gateway to talk about life. It's everything. Because that's what movies are about. It's a way to talk about life, death, love, loss, family, movies are an opening to discuss all of those things. So I just find it interesting that people get very offended by critics. You didn't like the movie that I liked. I want you to be in my bubble with my team. Which, in this climate, we're more and more divided over things that are, some of which really irrelevant. But I tend to like to read people that I don't agree with.
Well, and
where do you stand?
Well, that raises a really good point. I mean, a lot of times what I'll say to somebody is, what kind of films do you like? They'll say, what did you think about this movie? I'm like, well, what do you like? Because that's like, you're right. I like to read not only the people that I'm aware of or whatever, some of the higher profile people, but also I do kind of search out those other reviews. And you start to kind of get a thing in your brain where like you're reading The Reporter or Deadline, or you're reading whatever it is, Variety, and it's like you either agree with that person or you don't, or you respect that person for their differences.
Right.
And so it's a lot of times I actually look at the byline, which is funny to me. Now when I think about it, it used to just be like you'd read a review because it was a review of the film you wanted to see. Now I look at, who's writing and where are they coming from, and then I start to figure out, okay, well there's going to be a certain, especially with some of like Screen Rant or some of the internet-based stuff that is like, it's very fandom-based, and so you know exactly what you're going to get.
Right,
You know
right.
what I mean? And so I think it's really valuable to have that, but I just find myself as I think I'm a more knowledgeable critic for reading a variety of things and not just reading the folks that I agree with every time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So on your indie film sucks. I mean, it's also, having been someone who's made films, I'm my worst critic, which I think is, it's when you know too much, it can stop you from doing something. I think that's the thing I personally struggled with. But you see the types of things in indie movies. I feel like indie movies there's a reason I love them, and it's because they're not perfect. Because they don't come preloaded with a marketing budget and and the muscle from like a Disney or a major studio. Indie films are like birds with broken wings. I want them to fly away and spread their message to the world. So you already going in are going to they're going to be flaws, whether it's clearly they didn't have the budget for this or they weren't able to do that. But what I love is in an indie film, which is usually an emerging new voice, is seeing where they succeed. It's never perfect, but you'll see them succeed in places like tone, in performances, in ideas. They're not hampered by the fact that, every studio movie, 90+% of studio films are based on pre-existing properties. That is, movies, comic books, Broadway plays, books, things that have existed for a long time. They're not rolling the dice at studios, right? This is something that already comes with awareness from a marketing standpoint. So this is why we get so many reboots and remakes, and people already know that thing, or a film that's based on a title of a familiar song, right? that's another thing that you see over and over again. But indie films, that's where risks are taken. So
to that note, it's really kind of thrilling to me. When I was in Napa, I would watch like 1,000 movies a year, and you get numb to some stuff. But then you start to develop these for lack of a better term, antenna, and you start to look and you start to really key in on things like, wow, this title sequence is beautiful. You know what I mean? And then you're like, and it kind of sets you up. You're like, oh, maybe this person actually, visually they're on, or the cinematography is just really great. The acting's terrible, but there's something here. And
right.
You start to look for these elements, and that's the thrill. You're almost on a hunt with an indie film. Like, am I going to discover something that is potentially, I'm going to be one of those guys who can go, I remember their first film. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I remember Chris Nolan's film. He was great. Whatever. That kind of a thing, to recognize that genius. But I think one of the pitfalls that a lot of indie filmmakers have is they try, and I know it's because of budget or whatever else, but I think they try and do too much, and I really feel like the one thing that every director should have is an editor, because you should never edit your own film. I just think that's the kiss of death, because it's going to be self-indulgent, and I see so many movies that are like, could have lost 20 minutes of that, or 8 minutes, or whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's like you were saying, I mean, I've done that same thing. I programmed the Sonoma Valley Film Festival for 2 years and watched 1,000 indie films, and it is kind of like panning for gold. But when you see it, when you see something that has that creative spark, you're willing to overlook a lot of the other flaws. So I would say to the indie filmmakers that are here, raise your hands if you're indie filmmaker.
Raise your hand, Loomis.
Yeah. Don't worry about being perfect. You don't worry about being perfect. I like to, Mark Duplass, who gave a great, you can look it up on YouTube. He did a keynote speech at South by Southwest a couple years ago, and his philosophy is the cavalry isn't coming. The cavalry is not coming. You're not gonna make your movie and sell it for $1 million at Sundance. Just assume that's not gonna happen. Whatever resources you currently have at your disposal, make it with that. If you can make a movie with an iPhone, we all have these black mirrors that we carry around, right? If you can make something that's compelling with that, you've got something. I mean, you look at someone like Steven Soderbergh right now, who's said, I just want to make movies only on iPhones now. I mean, I'm not sure how long that'll last. He's made a couple so far, but I'm really encouraged to see what is possible, especially when you look at a film like Tangerine a couple years ago, that was made with the iPhone 5S. So there really is, I say this over and over, there really is no excuse not to make a film, and I feel like money is an excuse to not make a film. Don't let money be the barrier. And then, and by that I mean, I'll talk to filmmakers that say, well, you're gonna make it, it's gonna be a feature, it has to be made for $1 million. Well, why does it have to be made for $1 million? The correct answer should be, how much money do you need? How much do you have? It's whatever scale and level that you're at. So, and then I think that you do have to scale as an indie filmmaker. Just make a really good 1-minute movie. Then make a really good 5-minute movie. Then a really good 20-minute movie. And obviously move up from there into feature land. But I think going from 0 to feature is not the best bet. I think really it's helps to scale.
Well, and here's a great example of that. Damien Chazelle, of course, who opened First Man this weekend. Whiplash was a short film that he brought to Sundance to the Screenwriters Lab, made a short, killed it at Sundance, went off, got the financing, made the feature, killed it, and then La La Land, and now First Man. So perfect example, the short that he developed was kind of a proof of concept, right, for Whiplash, and that just, he didn't jump in and was making La La Land. I mean, that's not how it works.
And what's interesting, you can look this up on YouTube, Damien Chazelle. I've seen First Man 3 times. It's incredible. Really is a remarkable experience. The interesting thing that he did when they were doing the rehearsals, the opening sequence of La La Land is one shot. You can see the video for the rehearsal of it shot on an iPhone. And it's the same dance sequence. They did it in a parking lot with a bunch of actors. Obviously, they rehearsed this over and over and over again so that when they actually shut down I think it was the 118 freeway in Los Angeles, when they shut it down and shot on this overpass, they were able to get it. You should see this shot on an iPhone rehearsal of that sequence. It's incredible.
And he's holding the phone and walking backwards the whole time.
Right, yeah.
He has somebody making sure he doesn't fall. So I mean, it's phenomenal footage.
Yeah, it's really ambitious, and it just shows you that there are no limitations, really, especially with an iPhone. I think that there's just so much possible.
Yeah, so don't make your indie film suck is really what what we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can, I think most filmmakers that I know, I'm part of a documentary meetup group in Los Angeles. They get together once a month, talk about problems. I think that's a good place to share if you have a meetup group, and anyone can start a meetup group. But it's a great place to do. Every one of the filmmakers I know in this group always shows versions of their movies to small groups of people. In a 5-10 people together, all watch the film. You can feel it. You really can. I think screening your film for not necessarily friends and family, but peers within your group. screening that film, and you can feel the energy in the room when it works and when it doesn't. And the one thing I would say with regard to short films, I have almost rarely seen a short film where I didn't have the same note. Every short film I've ever seen, with the exception of very few, I could say could always be shorter. Every single short could be shorter. I think the sweet spot is under 10 minutes, more like the 8-minute mark. I think if you're going to make a 20 or 30-minute short, you may as well make the feature at that point with few exceptions. But I think the 8-10 minute mark as proof of concept really is a sweet spot. And then another small piece of advice for those making short films, do 2 versions of your short film. One that you send out to festivals that has a very quick title sequence. And the end title, I'm talking about under 10 seconds for your title sequence, maybe even 5 seconds. Festival audiences will love you because you had the shortest credit sequence. Then do a completely different version of your credit sequence that you send to friends and family and everyone who worked on the film that is much longer. So, and you can have that 60-second title sequence on your 4-minute short, right? Where everyone thanks mom and dad and family in those. But that's fine. I mean, that's the version you send to friends and family. The version that's screened at festivals should be remarkably short. Audiences will cheer when they see it. So that would just be my advice, is just to take, a critical eye. The ability to take a critical eye to your own work, I think, is important. So that's why being a critic in some sense is a useful skill as a filmmaker. Some of the harshest critiques I've ever heard have been from other filmmakers about other filmmakers' work, though they would never be public about it. But I'm sure you've heard that as well.
And I think that's a really good point too, because just showing your film to friends and family, you're not going to get the hard answers. They're not going to say, "Oh, that part dragged a little bit," and "This isn't developed," or they're going to be, "Oh, it's beautiful, I love it, thank you."
But if you show it to me, get ready.
Yeah,
I will be honest.
You will bring it.
I would be honest to friends and family. I mean, I have given notes on friends' scripts and films, and I try to have it be useful. Here's a way to fix this thing. But then, what am I, the editor? So I feel like also the ability to take notes, because film is a collaborative, it's a collaborative medium. Everybody does like to give credit to the director. And with all due respect, the director's really important. Director, and if you listen to the Film Threat podcast, you've probably heard this mentioned many times. The director's job is to be the tone police. They're the tone police. This character wouldn't do this. No, we're not going to do this. There are rules in terms of how the storytelling plays out. Tone police. I think it's the Coen brothers that said this, but I've heard other filmmakers echo this. You are the tone police as the director. Having said that, it's a collaborative medium. Everyone has the ability to contribute ideas, and the director's the filter. But I always believe the director's kind of like the quarterback. And then, to make a football analogy, do people like football in Tucson?
Yes.
I'm going to guess that they do. I've been walking around the downtown. I see a few sports bars. They look really fun. But yeah, I feel like the producer is like the coach, the director is the quarterback, the wide receivers, because they like to showboat, the receivers, those are the actors. You could take a whole analogy of every position, but the teams that really win are teams, right? They win, and I feel like in filmmaking it's the same thing. It's very collaborative. So
well, and I think that's a good point too, that like people who come in, especially first-time filmmakers who come in and they have a very distinct and really passionate about a specific, like, this is my vision, period, right? And it's like, I think the notion of the fact that this is a team lift, this is a collaborative event. Pick a couple things to be passionate about, but don't expect to get every single thing that your vision in your head it's probably not the best vision of what this thing is. Everybody's bringing something to that, and that's, you know, obviously the trick is assembling a team that you can collaborate with. But I think it's naive to think that your vision in your head is going to be what ends up on the screen, unless you're Christopher Nolan or you're somebody that gets to that level, right? You know, who has Final Cut, you know,
right?
It is. I mean, Woody Allen probably has Final Cut on all this stuff, obviously. Not that I'm trying to bring up Woody Allen, but you know what I mean. There's like certain people who, once you get to an auteur status, you can do that. But I think things are better for the fact that, you know, you look at folks who are working with the same cinematographers every year, and I mean every time, and it's like there's a collaboration there. It's not just the director or just the cinematographer.
Yeah, and that's why you see a lot of crews, they work with the same people, right? Because you've built this trusted group. I also want to say, first of all, it's so fun to be here. If you guys have any questions, you know, on what we're talking about or anything that relates, please raise your hand and we'll come over with the microphone and make sure to respond to your question.
Yes. So let's segue into that we're idiots.
Yes. I mean, first of all, there's a lot going on in film criticism today that I think is good and could be awful. But critics have mostly been dominated by old white guys. And here's two of them. You know, in what I've been doing with film for years, it's important to have a diverse voices, clearly. It's absolutely important. But I do think that what movies present as an opportunity is an opportunity to experience empathy for someone you are not. It's almost like putting on a headset, any film, and you become this character. Someone who's a different ethnicity than yourself, someone that is not the same gender or even the same sexual orientation. I feel like our ability to experience empathy, you know, films are almost like a test. What's the name of that test in Blade Runner that they give at the beginning? It's not the Rorschach test. That's a different test.
I know what you mean.
Yes.
The Myers-Briggs.
No, this is a fictional test to find out if you're a replicant. And it's the term escapes me at the moment, but I feel like it's important that we keep that in mind. That this is why films matter, because it's our opportunity to experience the world through someone else's eyes, experience their pain, their struggles, their challenges, and this is why I think that we're all. We're all here at this festival, right? We're all celebrating the diverse voices that are here at Film Fest Tucson.
So let's move. Jeannie, you want to say something?
Just a quick question.
Yes, Jeannie, can you ask a question?
Quick question, when festival submissions, how long, if it's an indie film, how long do you watch it if it's not really great in the beginning? How long do you give it a chance? Do you watch the whole film, 5 minutes? What do you watch?
Very good question. How long do you watch a film when you're programming? I mean, I think that every festival director would want to say that they watch 100% of it. I do know that with current technology and submission systems, you can see how long someone has actually watched the film. In the old days of DVD, I used to tell filmmakers, just send in a blank DVD and you'll find out if they actually watched your film. Because if they put on the blank DVD and they see that, oh, it's blank, they'll call you and ask, hey, send in your movie, there was a technical issue, right? But you can actually see if someone watched your film. I think, I like to watch 100%, but I will say when you've seen 7 pot documentaries about legalization of marijuana, clearly there are ones that bubble to the surface as the best. Right? So I think it almost becomes like brackets in sports, not to continue on the sports line. But it does become a little bit like brackets when you've got 15 romantic comedies. There are going to be ones that distinguish themselves as being something that's a better fit for the festival. But I like to watch 100% just because I would feel guilty, and I know I'm going to have to look that filmmaker in the eye, and I can't say that, I have to tell the truth. So,
and I would say that even when I was watching, the 4-figure number of films, I would always watch every single short film, just top to bottom, just because I felt like And really, it's like if you're watching 20 of them, you can do it in, a spot. I mean, you certainly have to get up and walk around so you don't have an aneurysm. But the features, a lot of times, I would pretty much say to myself, I'm going to give this, 40 minutes. And at 40 minutes, and I had this mental checklist, like, here's like 6 or 7 things. And if you failed on 6 or 7 of these things after 40 minutes, I know that's more of it. There's more of this coming up.
Yeah.
But also, I like to have a review sheet, and I like to have notes where I can keep track of things and make some notes on stuff. Because when you're watching that many films, it's overwhelming. So, but you're right. I felt the same way. I felt like somebody took the time, and not even the monetary thing, but somebody took the time to make something, and it's an incredible accomplishment to make a film. Even a bad film, it's an incredible accomplishment. So you deserve to have it seen by somebody besides your mother. I don't know.
Well, it's funny you bring up bad film. I think John Waters gave, one of the best pieces of advice. He said, if you try to make a bad film, you can't fail. So he encourages young filmmakers, just try to make a bad movie. And also to make a good bad movie, that's not such an easy thing. I mean, Lloyd Kaufman, I love Lloyd Kaufman, built an entire studio on, Troma films and the Troma brand. If you're going to see a Troma movie, it will not be a good movie. Now, will you be entertained by Poultrygeist? You will. I guarantee you will be entertained by Poultrygeist or The Toxic Avenger or Class of Nukem High. These are very entertaining films. Are they good films? Absolutely not. But I
know that. You know that going in, and that's fine. Yeah.
I love Troma. I love Troma.
So let's talk a little bit about, because this critic thing kind of feeds into the whole Rotten Tomatoes kind of world right now, and how Rotten Tomatoes has gotten this big pushback about, they were trying to make themselves more relevant with their big reveal that they were doing, and then the whole notion of the disconnect between the critic score and the audience score, you know what I mean? And then people start to migrate into Metacritic and stuff like that. So how do you feel about that kind of, have we democratized film criticism to a point where our opinions don't matter as much, and our experience and our knowledge and our ability to write or whatever? Or you know what I mean? And have we just kind of distilled the whole thing down to...
Here's the thing is, I think this is sort of my philosophy of life. I'm not giving that person power. I don't care. I have not, in fact, most often than not, it's the reverse. If I see a bad review of a film, it makes me want to see it more. Because I want to see exactly especially if it's just seethingly bad. Or a film that came out recently that I loved with Nicolas Cage called Mandy. Oh, it's a brilliant horror film.
It is unbelievable.
And if you read the reviews, it's a completely divided audience, either 1 star or 5. It really is. And I love movies that are divisive like that. But I just feel like, and maybe this is just because when I started Film Threat as a sort of a punk rock fanzine back in the day, we had a column called Hate Mail. This is in 1985. Right? So we would print, people would send us letters, we would print the physical letter, and then I would respond. And I have a who gives a shit attitude. And it is basically like a shield that prevents you from being manipulated or triggered or giving a shit what people say. So, because I've had this shield, I built up rhino skin where I just don't care. It's irrelevant. So I think that we live in an age where we're just way too affected by things that are stupid, like Rotten Tomato scores. Now, from a marketing perspective, filmmakers like Rotten Tomato scores because they link them to purchasing places on digital platforms like Vudu and iTunes, etc. But there are 2 scores. There's the critic score, and then there's the people score. I love the democratization of film criticism. I think it's welcome, but also I think I'm going to pay attention to other people's opinions more than others, and that's my choice. I'm not going to be affected by it. I think it's a thing, like just growing up as a nerd, and I was smaller in nature, and I was bullied, and I sort of learned that if I'm not affected by what the bully is doing, then the bully they lose interest. That's true in life, it's true on the internet, it works. Who gives a shit? You are now shielded and protected. So practice that. I think it just allows you to also be more honest and have the other people in your life be more honest because they're not walking on eggshells because they're trying to amend their opinions. So I'm not looking to hurt someone with my opinion or be malicious. Those people I call assholes. And which is unfortunately the largest growing population on the internet are those groups. And I'm just not just talking just anyone on the internet. I'm talking about people on all sides of every topic. There are just those people that, and I think we talked about this on at the jury the other day. That I think the biggest problem facing us now, and you see this in whether people are talking about The Last Jedi or they're talking about the midterm elections, right? It's we don't know how to talk to each other. And I think that this is the biggest challenge that we face today, because if we can't have a conversation between two people who disagree around a topic, we cannot solve global climate change. We cannot solve how are we going to build a society that is sustainable so that we don't plunder the planet. Every problem that we face, big and small, will not be solved unless we learn how to speak to each other. I think it's the biggest challenge we face now. So the internet is just sort of, this is where we see it just right in front of our eyes. But I see it all the time, and it's really frustrating, and it's seeped its way into film criticism and certain film critics being a target if they don't like something. And I just mentioned Last Jedi recently because there's a group of people, I think a very vocal minority, that really, really disliked the film. I think most people who saw it thought, that was a fun Star Wars movie. I happen to be in the camp where I absolutely loved it. And there are those that absolutely, but I respect the people who disliked it. I respect their reasons for disliking it. It's okay. We can dislike movies and be friends. This is something that we can do.
Yeah.
So let's. Gosh, I didn't mean to bring the room down with my
With your rant?
with my rant, but it's a concern. It's a concern.
So let's pivot to the salacious topic that we said we'd hit. How to shoot a nude scene.
Well, first of all, let's be clear about what I mean by this. For the filmmakers and I think almost half of the people here are filmmakers, right? Like, or in that realm. Well, first of all, there are technical ways to actually shoot nude scenes. For anyone that watches HBO or Game of Thrones, many nude scenes in Game of Thrones. But what I mean by this is, I think that the most important relationship is the one on a film set, is the one between the director and the actors. And what you're doing constantly as a director in that relationship with the actor is making them feel comfortable on camera, so comfortable that they feel that they're able to be emotionally naked. Just purely honest, which I think leads to the most realistic performance. So I don't actually mean physically nude, although I'm sure that's why this is a full room here. People thought that we were going to talk about that.
But there's no clip package, I'm sorry, we're not. No.
But I believe that the directors that are able to create an environment where actors can be, that have that kind of honesty, I think those are the ones that can master that relationship. Those are the ones that really make the most compelling films. I mean, at the level of Hollywood productions, you're hiring SAG actors, right, who are professionals, meaning they show up on time and they know their lines. And then once you've gotten past that, then how do you create that environment? And I think that is the biggest challenge for the indie filmmakers here. If you can do that, if you are capable of really working on that relationship with that actor and creating a space, whether it's a space where it's a small crew where they're about to do an emotional scene, and you have to make sure that everyone respects the headspace that the actor's going to be in, or it's something that's extremely difficult for the actor to make sure to get all of those points, or maybe not even let them worry about that, let the camera follow that actor. Whatever you need to do to make sure that that relationship is respected, I think that you're going to get the best performance out of that actor, and that's making them feel comfortable being naked, whether it is emotionally or whether they're buck naked on camera. And if you read about actually the technical aspects, because the aspects of actually shooting real nude scenes, it's pretty technical and kind of actually it's not sexualized in any way. It's just, this is for the camera, this is what we're doing, this is what it's for. It's actually kind of boring, actually, if you've ever been on a film set.
Well, it's
there's
the most
nudity.
unsexy thing that there could possibly be. It's
Incredible.
mechanics. Yeah.
Exactly. Mechanical, unsexy. And I've heard of film sets where people the crew gets naked along with the actors. Or in a film that I highly recommend. I like to, in these conversations, throw out film recommendations. I hope you write them down or remember them. But there's a brilliant film directed by a woman named Anna Biller. She's incredible director. She wrote, directed, and starred in a film called Viva. That when Viva screened that film, and she shot it in 35 millimeter, and people thought that it was a movie that was made in the 70s. And it's about a housewife in the 70s who has kind of a sexual reawakening, but Anna Biller herself is naked on camera. She's nude in many scenes along with other people. There's an orgy musical scene, and her mother's in that scene. Anna, I think, is a great talent, and I highly recommend that you find that film. I don't know if it's available streaming, but I've bought that film a couple times because I always end up giving it to friends, because I tell them, you have to watch this movie, Viva. It's brilliant. But when you have a director who's willing to do that, I think that it pushes the cast in a way that the value of that cannot be underestimated. So I appreciate that we have such a full room here from the salacious description of the program guide. Thanks for trusting me on that one, Herb.
We thought about it.
Right.
We actually talked about it. We said we want to make sure we get folks here, and maybe the naked will help do that. So we should take some time to get some questions from the audience. So folks, who has a question for Chris? Horst, what do you suggest? I got it.
Oh, thanks.
You suggested making a short film. First time I wrote a story, it became a book with almost 400 pages to be complete. How can I fit a whole story with all the 12 stages of the journey and everything into a minute?
You can't. I mean, and first of all, you won't. Just take one of the most interesting pages from that, would you say 400 pages?
360.
300, okay. Just take one page and just do that.
But then, how is it a complete story to what?
It doesn't matter.
No?
No, it doesn't matter. I think the internet proves that people's attention spans are. I mean, I think the most watched videos on YouTube are 4 minutes or less. You know, and in the world of Instagram stories and Facebook stories and whatnot, where I mean, you can get a little longer on the Instagram stories if you've got little chunks, but we've become accustomed to consuming things in little chunks. I once argued with a filmmaker who I thought had a brilliant film that was very episodic. I said, I think more people would see this movie if you released it as an app than if you just screened at film festivals for the next year. I would love for a filmmaker to take up that concept and actually take their movie and break it down into 10, 20, or 30-second bits and then release their movie as an app, free on the iPhone. But what you end up seeing is a story that transpires over the course of 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever the length of that film is. But you're seeing it in little chunks and maybe some clever way to couch it. But we consume media differently now. We consume media differently because people are perfectly willing to watch the latest Star Wars movie on the iPhone 7 or whatever iPhone is in your pocket. We've just become used to it. Where all of our movies are synced on all of our devices. So we can watch them anytime we want on a plane or if we're sitting on in a passenger seat, whatever. So, our brains are different with this stuff. So I think you have to actually capitalize on that. And there's a whole new genre of movies that take place on screens, right? Anyone here see the new Unfriended Dark Web? Okay, a couple people. I thought that film was brilliant. The whole film takes place in real time on a screen. It's different than the first Unfriended. I prefer the second one, actually, and I really love what was done with that film. We did a whole podcast interviewing the director. The movie Searching with John Cho. Did anyone see that? Love that film. Edge of your seat. I mean, I believe if Hitchcock were alive today, he would have made a movie like that. It has the same tropes of many thrillers. You know, it starts out with a daughter is missing. The father gets her computer and starts to track down, you know, what happened to her. Why is she missing? Suddenly, he's now a suspect in her potential murder. It really is a Hitchcock film, so it's something we're familiar with, told a different way, which I think is, if you're an indie filmmaker, you know, it's a story that's been told a million times. How are you going to tell it differently? Right? What are you going to do that's going to make it completely different? Is it a romance? Is it a traditional romantic comedy? Or like a Rainer Werner Fassbender made a film called Ali Fear Eats the Soul about a black man who has a relationship with a 50-year-old German white woman, and it's a traditional romance. We've never seen something like that before, and that was made, God, what, in the 70s, 60s or 70s? So I think, just to reference a movie that no one here has seen in the audience, I know no one's going to raise their hand, but that's okay. It's take something you've seen before, just tell it in a completely different way.
Well, and you know, you raise an interesting point, because I mean, there are, you know, X amount of stories, right? And it's just, how is that remixed? And one of the things that I always find more compelling is, and some folks may know this movie from last year, that Haley Lou Richardson, who's going to be with us tonight, she made this movie directed by Kogonada called Columbus, and it was just one of my favorite movies of last year, because it was such a non-traditional kind of relationship between John Cho, which is why I thought of it, and Haley Lou, because it was not a romantic, it was not like, oh, these two are gonna, you know, fall in love or whatever. It was like they had this friendship, and it was just such a cool way of having these two characters who needed to find each other, and there was no sex about it or anything else. It was just these great minds that needed to connect, and it was just beautifully filmed in Columbus, Indiana, and it's so refreshing to me to see something like you're saying that's been remixed. You know, it's like, we know this stuff, we understand this is, but it's just been represented to us, and that's encouraging and exciting that people are still doing that. You know, there's still ways to remix those same stories, whatever they are. You know. Yeah. How about another question, Loomis? Hey, I got it. Hang on. Sure.
Oh, probably not enough. I don't need it. Viva's on Netflix, by the way.
Oh, Viva's on Netflix? Oh my God, I love it. Viva. Put that in your Netflix queue.
We'll watch it tonight.
Great.
Have you given up on revenue streams?
What's that? What?
Revenue streams. Have you given? How are you funding what you do now?
Oh, what I do?
Yeah, because I know you guys. You know, you had the print magazine, and then early in the 2000s, you were going to do some distribution, and that fell through.
Well, that's because DVD died.
Right.
And
so DVDs are dead.
DVD died, and shelf space was purchased by the studios who just bought up indie brands and labels and then released them under the larger. Yeah. A Film Threat is really funded by people who want to advertise. If an indie filmmaker, I'll give you the math. The math is that we get about 250 films pitched to us a month. Filmmakers, it's either individual filmmakers that want to have their movies reviewed, or publicists that say, please review our movie. I've got 25 writers located all over the world, and they're able to review on average about 4 films themselves. So that's about a little over 100 movies. So we cover about half of the 250 movies that come to us. If it is critically important for you to have your film reviewed by a certain time, we ask for a small submission fee, right? Additionally, people can advertise. I only relaunched Film Threat less than 2 years ago. And first of all, I wanted to rebuild a new team, bring in new people. We are actually starting to release movies on streaming services. Our first title is a movie called The Theta Girl, which is an exploitation horror film that you can get on Vimeo. So if you go to vimeo.com, just look up The Theta Girl. We'll also be releasing it on other platforms. It's also on Blu-ray. So I'm spinning up these different revenue streams. The first one being, submission fees from filmmakers. The next will be advertising. But yeah, it's that. I mean, and we launched our YouTube channel about 4 or 5 months ago. So it really is. It's one of those things where I joke that, like, if you're in this space, you're really just doing community service, right? I mean, that's how Film Threat's making money. Is we're looking for movies to distribute, and then little streams of revenue here and there. So yeah.
Sort of follow up that you were kind of think already alluding to this with the gallery stuff. I mean, as an independent filmmaker, we just have to basically acknowledge the idea that anything we make is not going to make any money.
Well, what I think what you have to look for is a champion that that loves what you do, and they're investing in you, not necessarily the film. And it really is, I like to call it art welfare. So get someone who is willing to lose whatever the budget is. I mean, with Film Threat, I look for sponsors and people to help us. We're not technically a nonprofit, but we function like a nonprofit. So I look for donated office space, donated services, people to just help us in our mission. So I guess money should probably be something that's more important, but it never really has been, because I feel like money in the process can be somewhat corrupting. Because I'll look at small websites that get co-opted, and then the larger mission goes away. So I'm very wary when someone wants to drop a large sum of money on us. I think, well, where do I sign, Mr. Devil? But that's just I should probably get over that. But we really only recently have begun to spun up efforts to bring revenue into Film Threat. But if you're willing to give me money, I'm willing to listen. I just want to know what the catch is. But same thing with filmmakers raising money, I mean, I do a panel where the whole panel is getting a group of experts together, bringing someone up, and then the person that sits in the chair in the audience asks for $1 million. And then everyone's job in the panel is to shoot that person down and to give reasons why not to give you $1 million. And the idea is to get over that and try to fight against that. So, I think it's it's definitely a challenge for anyone that's an artist. How do you make that compromise in your head about, I need money for a big thing, but I want to do my vision. So I guess I have to cast your niece. So this happens. This happens on films, projects big and small.
So let's do one more. We got time for one more question.
I think you spoke earlier about like the role that money plays in movies.
Yeah.
And there's so much content out there today, so much high level, high production value content. And you talk about someone like Damien Chazelle, who made Whiplash, but that's like the short for Whiplash that cost $23,000. That's not nothing. That's $23,000.
Right.
That's $23,000. That's a good amount of money. Do you think that to be taken seriously, you need to, rise above that sort of beginner level and have that higher production value? Don't you think you need that money to be taken seriously in some ways?
Yes and no. I've always believed that production value is two things. Production value is cast and location. That is your best production value. I think, just having been in Tucson, the short time I've been, there's a lot of production value here in terms of location.
Yes.
Yeah, so cast, I mean, I always think it's always best to go with professional actors. Really, I think that cast is important. As for $23,000, I think, I don't recommend this, but clearly you could put 23 grand on a credit card if you had to, but I don't recommend that you do it. And these days, you don't necessarily have to, right? You can, I mean, I have a 4K camera in my pocket, an iPhone. So I'm sure you have one too, everyone has these. So production value isn't money, and money doesn't make you a good filmmaker. And I think that what I've always observed is, I think the filmmakers that really shine are the ones that are able to make a compelling work, but money was not there, right? I think you can always tell I'm making a showpiece to get hired by Hollywood. And it's very obvious because then they focus on, what money can bring to production. I've seen shorts that were made for, $100,000 plus, and it doesn't mean that they're better films, right? So I really think that it's a matter of what are you able to make, and looking for that panning for gold. What can you do with the resources that you have, and knowing that the cavalry's not coming, and then just scaling. Not just make one short, but make several, and be willing to fail. And also, I don't recommend actually charging money on credit cards. I think that what you should do is have a lifestyle where you're able to have some freedom to be able to have the time to create, but also live a financially responsible lifestyle, because that is the challenge for an artist. I mean, we saw a film here yesterday, the documentary, The Price of Everything, that is just about that theme, art and commerce. That is a battle that every filmmaker at every level fights. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you're making the next Marvel movie or whether you're making, just the film on your iPhone. That will be something that you will be fighting. So that's an ongoing battle. So I have no clear-cut answer to that, other than get ready to fight with yourself. And thank you for your question. It was great.
So we need to wrap up, but I just want to thank Chris so much for your feedback, for your ongoing labors to expose greatness in film and mediocrity as well. And Chris will be around this for the rest of the festival. So please, he's a friendly guy. So definitely come up and say hello to him. We've got Catherine Hardwick's directing master class coming up in this space next. So if you're not going to be in here, we'll probably have you move to the lobby. But thank you again, Chris, for being here, and thanks for being a part of Film Fest Tucson.
Thank you, Herb. Thank you, Film Fest Tucson.